Hi, it's Jim here. I wanted to talk to you today a little bit about James Joyce and his collection of short stories, Dubliners. Tell you a little bit about why I chose it as a particularly useful text to look at when we're talking about how somebody chooses to tell a story. Joyce was well known and famous for pioneering stream of consciousness technique in his writing, in that he would have a narrator who we would have access to, but not in any set way, not in a linear way. So we'd sort of have the narrator's ideas as they came to him or her. Often those ideas were out of order, or we weren't quite sure whether we could trust what the narrator made out of those. In some stories, like Araby, for instance, we hear the story from the point of view of the unnamed narrator, a young boy who's in love with or has a fixation on his neighbor's sister, Mangan's sister. She's never even given a name. But anyway, as he comes to realize the futility of the feelings that he feels for Mangan's sister towards the end of the story, we have to question whether he understands the lesson. Is he mature enough to get the point of it? Do we as readers of the text understand more at various points than the actual characters in the text understand? Another story that's quite a bit like that would be Eveline, in which our protagonist, Eveline, runs through her history of living in Dublin, of living with her father, who treats her cruelly, and doesn't quite know how to deal with the emotions, the positive emotions that she has, along with those negative emotions when she thinks of the way that she's been treated. And so at the end, when she makes this tumultuous decision, we're not told exactly why she makes it, because she's been the storyteller. We see it through her mind's eyes, and I don't think she really quite understands what she's doing at the end of that text, why she makes the choice that she does. So in both cases, we see good examples of stream of consciousness and unreliable narrators to some extent. In the story The Sisters, we see another interesting bit of storytelling in that we get the story of the priest, the dying priest, through the young boy's point of view until the last couple pages, those tumultuous, important last couple of pages. Suddenly, what happens? The boy's point of view disappears, and the story is told as in dialogue between some of the minor characters. So we don't really get the boy working through it. We're left to work through it for ourselves. And Joyce, as I said, was really a master technician when it came to how he told his stories, his control of narration. Another thing that he often used, particularly in his novels, is the idea of intertextuality. That another story is the foundation for the story being told. There's references, allusions, quotations from something else. His most famous novel was Ulysses, which was structured on and built around Homer's Odyssey, Homer's Ulysses, in Greek literature, but updated into 20th century Ireland. So that's an example in a book length, or in a novel of intertextuality, but even in some of the short stories we see this as well. One of the more subtle uses of intertextuality is in the short story A Painful Case. In the very beginning of the story, we're told that Mr. Duffy lives in Chapel Izod. And interesting, it's actually a place just outside of Dublin, but it also is closely united to an old Irish story, an old Irish myth of Tristan and Isolde. In Tristan and Isolde, you had a lover's triangle between the knight, Tristan, Isolde, who was the queen, and her husband, King Mark. And they had to work through this triangle, this lover's triangle, much like the characters in A Painful Case are caught in a lover's triangle that they end up working through. The story also, Tristan and Isolde, is closely related to the Arthurian myth, and probably they both have a common denominator a common story at some point, or Tristan and Isolde came out of the King Arthur story. And so, the story in the painful case of Mr. Duffy searching for something, searching for that Holy Grail, plays an integral part in the story, much like King Arthur searching for the Holy Grail. And in fact, many of the characters throughout Dubliners are looking for some sort of a Holy Grail. They're searching, they're on a journey quest where they're trying to find answers to something. So this intertextuality in the one short story can be found elsewhere in the collection as well. Finally, as you read through the various stories, pay particular attention to the last one, the dead, and look at how Gabriel's point of view, which subsumes the whole story for the first 3/4 of it, subtly changes, and we get the points of view of Greta and the dead, all the dead, at the very end of the story as well. And we are forced as readers to change our opinion of how we feel about Gabriel Conroy. At any rate, I just wanted to touch upon a few of these things. I hope I didn't spoil any of the endings if you haven't read them yet. I tried to remain fairly nondescript. I tried not to give things away. But I do want you to look at some of the techniques that Joyce uses. He was fascinated by early cinema. And in fact, started a movie house in Ireland that failed miserably. But I think he took a lot of what he saw in films, a lot of the idea of how do you do a voiceover? Well, you do a stream of consciousness. He did things like this and tried to use them in his stories. So keep an eye out for those things as you read through or reread Dubliners, whatever the case may be. Thank you very much. Have a great day.